No Sasquatch were harmed in the recording of this podcast.
I'm Scott. I had a couple Bigfoot encounters. It was a very terrifying thing, terrifying experience, and I do not want to have it again.
Scott, welcome to Bigfoot Crossroads.
Hey, man, thanks a lot for letting me come on your podcast and tell my experiences out.
Absolutely. It's been, I guess you messaged me about a year ago.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's good to be on here, though, to be able to tell my encounters. I don't do this. I'm not worried about if people believe me or not. That's not why I'm doing this. I mainly do this because of what happened to me. It changed my life. And two, for people that hike and go hiking or other hunters, I just do it to make sure that people are aware of what's out there. That I believe, Sasquatch is real. People ask me, well, are you a believer? It's not that I'm a believer. I'm a knower, because what happened to me, it couldn't have been anything else. I tried to wrap my mind around it if it could be something else, and there was nothing else there that could have been like that. But I'll start. My first encounter was in 2000, in around November, maybe 15th or 16th. I can't remember the exact date. I know that there was no moon phase. The moon phase had went out. So it could have been 15th or 16th or maybe a little later, because it's been a while since this happened. But I remember I lived in a town called Frankenmuth, Michigan, and I was hunting in a town called Mayville, Michigan, which was, as the crow flies, direct A point to B point was about an hour and 40 minutes. So if I was going to hunt over there, I would have to get up pretty early, about 3 o'clock in the morning, get all my gear, take a shower, and get on my way to get over there. And I like to get in the woods in the dark. I mean, for any hunters out there, you know what I'm talking about. Getting, in there in the dark, don't spook anything if you can, get set up, because the larger bucks are usually coming from the field or wherever they are back to the bedding area. And that's usually how you can score and get some deer. So I got to the homeowner's property about, I don't know, it's probably about 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was pitch black because there was no moon. And even if you're outside of the woods, it's hard to see when there's no moon. So when you get in the woods, you can't see the hand in front of your face. So I got out of my car, and the first thing I noticed was it was dead still, like a creepy dead still. Like it was just so quiet. I could hear ringing in my ears. And I've been out and hunted before. I mean, this is going to be my 32nd year this year of hunting. So, I've been out when it's been calm days, and, it's usually pretty quiet, but this was like really, really creepy quiet. And you could hear a pin drop literally on the ground. So I went out around my car over to the side. I got my gear, got everything on, got my bow, and I started down the 2-track. Now, for people that don't know what a 2-track is, it's usually you can drive a 4-wheeler down through there. You could drive a car through there. It's pretty wide. And the 2-track went into the woods, and it went east for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 miles back in there. It's pretty wide. And also, to get into the woods, I had to go down about 50 feet, 40, 45, 50 feet behind the landowner's house. He was kind of up on a hill to get down into the woods. And the crazy thing is, I went in there before, and, I had a few turkeys that took off from a pine tree. And I don't know if you've ever hunted, but when a turkey takes off and flies out of a tree, it's pretty scary. It'll make your heart jump into your throat. It'll freak you out. But I started down the 2-track, and I got into the woods, and I would have to take a right because the 2-track turned right, and then I would be heading south. So I would walk maybe 10 steps south, and then it would turn to the left, and then I would be facing east. So I would walk up to this game trail, another, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps. There's a game trail that dumped into the 2-track. Well, I would turn right, and I would take that game trail about 2 football fields back in. There was my stand, about 200 yards, and I would be facing south. And I started down that game trail. And I always walk in the woods when I go in there because it's so dark. I always have a flashlight on my leg, and I have it clicked on. And I just rock it every once in a while to the right or to the left so I can see what's kind of in front of me without spooking anything. So I don't trip over a limb I don't see, or, a small tree or whatever, because that's happened to me before. I've landed on my face. So years of landing on my face, I got smart, and I started having a flashlight. So I started down that game trail, and I went maybe, 16, 17 steps, something like that. And I stepped on a twig, and it made a crack noise. It just went crack. And to my right, about 30 yards away, something got up. And it made so much noise getting up that I literally froze in my tracks, and I was bent over. So when I was walking, I stepped on the twig. It made all this noise getting up, and I stopped and was bent over, and I could not move. Immediately, I just couldn't move. And this thing got up, and it took 5 steps in behind me onto the game trail. It walked just like you and me. It wasn't a deer, a coyote, anything else. The thing of it is, in this woods where I was in Michigan, there was no elk, there's no bear, there's no grizzlies, there's no caribou. There's nothing big like that. There's no moose, nothing. The biggest thing in there is me and deer. And I'm probably the biggest predator in there. So this thing walked like you and me, took 5 steps. I heard it. I know what animals sound like. I've been hunting a long time. And it stopped. Now I'm in the pitch dark. I'm in black. Like, I cannot see anything. I want people to understand how scary this was. Like, I couldn't see it, but the sound that it made getting up, it like it was moving all kinds of leaves, and it was just really loud and noisy getting up. And then immediately I could just barely hear it walking, and it got in behind me. So I'm standing there still bent over, and my mind's telling my body, Scott, straighten up, straighten your body up. And I couldn't do it. I was just froze, bent over, and I couldn't straighten my body up. Well, I'm standing there, and it seemed like 10 minutes, but it was probably a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And I finally got to straighten up, and still there's no sound behind me. No sound of it walking on, nothing. I know it's directly behind me. And I'm thinking to myself, this is it. This is it, man. This thing's going to come down this trail, and it's going to get me, and they're never going to find me again. I really thought I was going to die. I was starting to really get terrified. So I'm like, well, I'm going to keep moving and get to my stand. I'm going to get away from this thing. So I took 4 steps, and as I took 4 steps, it starts walking. Now it's going directly east down that 2-track. I'm going south. So I started to feel a little bit easier because it's kind of starting to go away from me. But I would take 4 steps and I would stop, and it would take 5 steps and stop. And then I'd take 5 steps and stop, and it'd take 6 because I don't think it knew, it didn't know when I was going to stop, but it's still going out away from me. So the 3rd time I did that and stopped, I could still hear it walking, and it stopped. I'm like, screw this. I'm going to pull this flashlight up, and I'm running down this trail, and I'm getting to my tree stand, and I'm getting up in the air. I knew nothing about Bigfoot. The only thing I knew about Bigfoot is when I was 8 or 9 years old, I watched In Search Of. I saw Patty for the first time, Patterson-Gimlin film, and I thought to myself as a little kid, because I wasn't camping out in the woods, I wasn't hunting, I thought, well, I'm never going to see one of them because they're out in California. They're out in the Pacific Northwest. They're not anywhere around me. I'm never going to run into something like that. So, hunting all these years, I never thought I was going to run into something like this. I'm just, when I went in there and, had this happen, I was just going in there to hunt deer. Bigfoot wasn't even on my mind. So I pulled that flashlight up and I took off running. And when I took off running, it took off running. And all I heard was thump, thump, thump as this thing is running. Now it's paralleling me. And I'm thinking, running down, is this thing going to cut me off? Or what the heck is it doing? Because I heard these 5-second intervals between each footstep. Like it was taking big strides, man. I mean, big strides. And all I heard was these, this thumping noise. And people have asked me, well, what was the sound like of it running? And I said, if you would cut a tree down and cut a portion of it out and put an eyelet in one end of it and put a hook on a chain and haul it up about 20 feet and drop it, when it hit the ground, that's what it sounded like. I knew whatever this was big, okay? I mean big. It was very heavy. So I'm hearing it hitting all these tree sticks and limbs on the ground. It's cracking all this. And this stud, I get to my tree. I drop my flashlight. I pick it back up. I hook my bow on. Now it's starting to slow down, and it's getting into basically the swamp area because I hunted right along a swampy area. And it's starting to, slap in the water. And I'm climbing up my tree, trying to get the hell up in the tree. I knew nothing about Bigfoot. Now I find out that they push trees over. So I'm, now I'm thinking, well, that wasn't a good move on my part to climb up the tree because I could have pushed the tree over. But I got up in there, got my bow up, got my safety harness on. And now it's going southeast of me. And I can hear it out in the swamp walking. And all of a sudden I hear it stop. And I'm just sitting there with my hands over my nose, right below my eyes. And I'm like watching a horror film. You know how you get really scared. I mean, by then I was shaking really bad. Couldn't wrap my mind around what I just heard. And I hear it start ripping the limbs off a tree. And I'm hearing this, remember, it's dead still. There's no wind, nothing. It is so quiet in there. And I'm hearing this crack, crack, pop, pop, crack, pop. And it's just tearing these limbs off this tree. And I'm thinking with my hands up to my face, man, dude, you got to have hands to do that. There's nothing in here that can do that other than another human being. And I knew there was no other human beings in there. I knew there was no people camping or a homeless person maybe living back in there. I would have known it instantly because I hunted in there all the time. But I'm hearing these cracking and popping of these limbs. And then I hear it start to walk again after that. And gradually it got out to where I couldn't hear it. So, this is in the dark and I'm sitting up there like, I am not getting down out of this tree. I am like petrified. I am not climbing down here. Because usually the usual setup is I get in the dark. By 9:30, the deer pretty much move through. If I didn't take a deer, I'd get down. I was down and out of there by 10:30. I didn't get out of that tree till almost 11:30. I could not convince myself to climb down that tree. I was so scared. I mean, I'm kind of shaking right now, just reliving this because every time I talk about this, it's like being there and reliving it and being in that damn pitch dark. But I gradually got down. I got all my gear. I went down the 2-track over the hill. I hunted a bull. I had 25-foot ridge all the way around me, and I was up 20 feet. So I could, almost see to the top of the ridge around me, but I couldn't see down on the other side. I'll get to that in a minute. But I got down there lickety split. I got down that game trail and I got up by the landowner's house. I put all my stuff in my car and I got out of there and went home. And I got home and that's all it was on my mind. Like, I was so scared that I just kept thinking about over and over what happened and what I heard. And never knowing that now a lot of people see him in Michigan, have actually physically saw a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. I didn't know about any of that. You know, I couldn't really get on the internet. Internet was really fresh back then. So there wasn't a lot of places to go to look up Bigfoot or anything. So I just had to kind of deal with this on my own and just try and hash in my head, like, what just happened to me. So I sat and debated on selling all my gear and getting rid of it and not going back in the woods. That's how scared I was. And I remember I woke up one night and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I got up out of bed. I went out and sat in my living room. I couldn't sleep. And I just thought to myself, man, you got to get back over there. You have to go back over there and get in there and face this, or otherwise the alternative is you're going to sell everything. You're going to get rid of everything and you're never going to go back in the woods ever again. And, you know, hunting is my passion. I love to deer hunt. I hunt with some of my buddies in Ohio. I'm originally from Ohio. We get together. It's the camaraderie and hanging out. And if somebody gets a deer, we're all excited. So I knew, if I didn't get back in my car and drive back over there and hunt, that was going to be, the latter was going to be the alternative, and I was going to be done hunting in that very moment. So I went back over, and this was probably about almost 4 weeks later. Hunting season was almost over, and I went back. You know, after this, I wouldn't go back in the woods in the dark. I was so rattled that I would wait till first light, and then I would go in, and then I would come out in last light. I would never come out in the dark or go in the dark. It took me a while to get past that. But I hunted in there for 3 more years, and this is where it gets a little hairy. Because I can remember going in there, and I would be sitting in there first light, and out, you know, maybe 500-600 yards away from me, I would hear a tree knock, and it sounded like whatever was hitting a tree was exploding the tree into a million pieces. It was so loud. I could hear it that far away. I could still hear it. And that was at the south end. And then about 25-30 seconds later, way off to the north of me, I would hear another knock. And I'm like, you know, wait a minute, this thing in the south can't get clear over here to the north. So there's 2 of these things in here now. So now I know there's more than one. And I, you know, researched later, you know, up till recently, I heard some people that are researchers, field researchers, and they said that a lot of times a Bigfoot will let a group or another one know how many people are in the woods. So if you hear a single knock, that means there's one person here. If you hear 2 knocks, that's usually 2 people and on so. So I would hear one, and then I would hear one on, you know, the north side. I would hear whoops every once in a while. I would hear a whoop, and it would make my head snap. Like, did I just hear a whoop in the swampy area of it? And then I would hear one to my left, and I'm like, what the heck? And then I would, over the ridge behind me, I would hear whistling, and it kind of sounded like a bird, but a lot bigger, like a big diaphragm. And, you know, I would hear, and I would hear it to the left of me on the other side of the ridge, and then I would hear it to the right of me, and then I would hear it directly behind me. And it got to a point where I stood up, turned around, and looked around my tree, trying to look in the woods on top of that ridge, because it sounded like it was right on top of the ridge. But I could never see anything. But I would hear that. all the time. So I was like, God, it was just like creepy, because I could tell that it wasn't a bird, and I knew it wasn't somebody in there because I can't whistle real loud like that and have that tone. And this was whistling pretty loud. Well, later on down the road, I hear people talking about they heard one whistle. It's like, wow, I heard whistling. Okay, so the characteristic is the same thing. There was a guy on a podcast I was listening to, I think it was on Wes Germer's podcast. He lives out, I think in Oregon or maybe Texas, somewhere pretty far from me. He did the exact same whistle as what I did. I don't know the man, never met the man. You know, how is he doing the same whistle that I'm doing? And this happened in 2000, and he, you know, his was just like in 2015 or 2016. We don't know each other. How are we doing the same whistle? You know what I mean? If this isn't real, if people don't think these things are real, how are we doing the same thing? So getting back to my experience, I would hear these whistles. I would hear these whoops. When I would hear tree knocks, I would see nothing. No deer, no squirrels, no geese, no ducks, no birds, nothing. It's like the woods was silent. I would see nothing. So it was really weird for me to hear this and not see any animals of any kind. Certainly no deer. But the most hairiest thing for me, it was like 2003, and it was in December, and it was getting too cold to hunt, and I had not gotten a deer that year in 2003. So I remember climbing down on my stand just before dark. It was still kind of light out, and I popped my flashlight on, got all my gear, and I'm walking up over the little bowl as it broke down past me, and I'm walking out down the game trail that I had this first encounter with, and I get hit in the back with a stone, little rock, hit me right in the shoulder blade, and that froze me. I stopped, and I looked down with my flashlight, and there's a rock right next to me, and I'm like, did I just get hit with a rock in my shoulder? And so I turn around real slow, and I'm doing, a 180 around behind me, looking for somebody that just threw a stone at me. I don't see any eye shine. I don't see anything. So I'm like, okay, well, that was weird. So I start walking down the trail again. I take another 10 or 12 steps. I get hit in the shoulder again, almost in the same spot. And this time it stung a little bit. And immediately I turned around real quick, and I had this flashlight, and I am like shining out everywhere. So I'm like, what the heck is going on? And let me jump back for a second. When I got hit with the stone, the first one, I was right next to a pine tree. I've heard these things climb up in trees. I didn't really want to look up, because I'm thinking, why is a rock dropping on me out of a tree, or why is a rock being thrown at me and I don't see anybody behind me? So I did look up in the pine tree. I forced myself to. There was nothing up there. So then I walked down. I got hit with the second stone, almost in the same spot. I turned around, and nothing there. I didn't see anything. So I bent down, I picked that stone up, and I still have it to this day. I have it here in my house. And I got to the end of that game trail, into the 2-track, and I just said to myself in my mind, okay, guys, I'm done. I'm never coming back here. You can have this place, but I'm never going to step foot in this place again. And I started walking, and I didn't hear anything. I got up that 2-track, and I got in my car, and I took off, and I never went back there. And that was 2003, and I've never been back there. I never stopped and said anything to the homeowner. I got in my car, and I got the hell out of there. And that was it for me hunting there.
Have you thought about reaching out to them now that it's later?
No, because I don't think they would believe me, to be honest with you. Or maybe they've seen something. I don't know. But the thing of it is, when you have something like this go on, you're trying to wrap your mind around it. And it's so uncanny that it's hard to wrap your mind around it. It's hard to understand it. So to go up to a landowner and say, look, I just had this stuff going on. This is what's going on. These were, pretty good friends of mine. I didn't want him to think I'm crazy. I didn't want him to think I'm wacko or I've lost it. You know what I mean? This is what you have. I mean, I have a good friend in Ohio and he's on the fence with it. And he sends me stuff on Bigfoot. I send him stuff. And he said, well, I've been hunting for over 15 years, not as long as you. I've never seen one. I've never had anything happen. And I said, that doesn't mean these doesn't exist because you haven't seen one or, I hunted a long time before I had this happen to me, and it was never on my mind. I was going out to hunt deer. I loved it. It was great to get in there in the dark and get set up and wait for these deer to come down the trail. It was awesome. But there's, the thing I want people to understand is there's no parade. There's no money in this field. All there is ridicule. That's why a lot of people have things happen and they never talk about it. I've heard two guys going down a dirt road. Sasquatch comes out of a ravine. They stop. What the heck is that? It stands there and looks at them, and it goes down the other ravine, and they wait 5 or 10 minutes because they're so scared to even drive up by there, and then they never talk about it ever again. Maybe one guy moves away. They lose their friendship over it. So, there's nothing but ridicule and people making fun of you. I waited 3 years to tell somebody about what happened to me, about all of it. 3 years. And my ex-wife and I were going through a divorce, and we were meeting at the child support center, and we were just talking. And I said, look, you've been with me for a really long time, and I need to talk to somebody about something that happened to me. She's like, well, what's going on? What happened to you? Well, I told her about the initial thing in 2000. She got a big smile on her face. She was my wife. She was the closest thing to me next to my mother.
Yeah.
And she's starting to crack a smile. This is what happens. This is why a lot of people will not tell their stories. There's stuff going on right now as you and I speak about or have a conversation about this situation or this field that, people that are hiking, people are out in the Pacific Northwest, in Texas, Minnesota, Missouri, are having an occurrence or an experience with one of these or a family of them that are being escorted out of the woods, or they're being paralleled. They can't see, but they can hear something walking. I've heard all kinds of people's encounters, but they'll never tell anybody. They won't go on a podcast. They won't tell anybody. They'll keep it to themselves for years because they're so afraid of the mindset of someone laughing at them or not taking them serious. And, I had to tell my friend in Ohio, look, dude, I'm not playing games here. I'm not messing around. I mean, I'm too busy to be hoaxing anybody or making a story up. I mean, this is what really happened to me. It was terrifying, man. It messed with my psyche, my mind. You know what I mean? I went home in fear. I didn't even want to go back in the woods. It scared me so bad. I had to overcome fear just to go back in there and then hunt in there 3 more years of this, with whoops and whistling and knocks and, to sit there only because I had to face my fear. I had to get past it because otherwise I was never going to hunt ever again. I was going to sell everything and be done. And I just told myself, whatever happens, happens, but I'm not going to quit hunting. I'm not going to let these things run me out. They're just not going to run me out. And I love doing this, and I'm going to continue to do it. But, I had to tell her in 2003 because I didn't tell anyone for 3 years. Nobody. Nobody. In fact, my sisters, I have 4 sisters. I only told one of that encounter, and it's 2022 because I didn't want my family to think I'm nutso. And that's what you get. People look at you like, oh, you're strange. And you see these reports on the news, and the newscasters are laughing, and, it's a big joke. Well, it's not a big joke when you have something that's 600 to 1,000 pounds get up off the ground, which I didn't know they slept on the ground either back then. But it gets up and walks like you behind you. And then you take off running, and it's running, and you hear the thump sound of how heavy it is. You can't get your mind around it. You know, you're having something happen to you with something that doesn't supposedly supposed to exist, and you're encountering it in the moment, in the pitch dark, in the black, and you can't see it. You know, you can't even see your hands. So it was very terrifying for me what happened, and I've never been back there. So, and that's been 22 years. But I worked at a hospital, and I had a Native American friend that worked with me. We worked in security, and we would have to work 2 weekends off. And I saw him one weekend, and, you know, usually at the hospital on the weekends, you didn't have a lot of things going on. It was a skeleton crew working, and, you know, there was a few of us working in security. So we were sitting, you know, next to each other in our Jeeps talking, and I told him about what happened in 2000. And I told him what happened after that, but I didn't tell him it was me. And I told him about getting rocks thrown and hitting me, but I didn't tell him it was me. And I, you know, told him that, you know, the guy picked a stone up, and he said, wait a minute, wait. He goes, back the bus up. He said he picked one of the rocks up. And I said, yeah, he picked it up and took it with him. He said, oh, no, that's not a good thing. He said, you know, my people believe that if you touch something that they touch, they're spiritually connected to you, and they will find you. They'll find you somewhere, but you know, that guy's going to have another occurrence. He's going to run into another one, because you just don't do that. That's bad karma. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. Now, who am I to tell him that he's full of it when I'm telling him about having a Sasquatch experience? You know, now I'm going to tell him that him and his people are crazy because they believe supernaturally that it connects you to the Sasquatch people.
No, you know, that's really interesting. I have a friend who's Native American. He's one of my best friends. He's actually been on the show because he had an experience. His grandmother was full-blood Cherokee, and she told him she had the same exact belief with the Cherokee tribe, at least here in Oklahoma. If you found something in the woods, you left it in the woods. You didn't bring it home. And her husband had actually brought home an old hubcap he had found whenever he was walking home from work through the woods, and she made him go and take it back to the woods and put it back where he found it. Like,
right.
She was that serious about it. So it's really interesting that you heard the same thing up there.
Well, I have a friend out in Missouri, and I was on his podcast, and we sent each other our numbers, and we, you know, he's a hunter too, and he's actually seen a couple Sasquatch right behind his house, a juvenile and a big male, and he actually really saw him, and he has his own channel, and, you know, he's captured, you know, whoops and all kinds of yells and screams, and one pushed a tree over, and he's got all that audio wise on video because it was too dark to get it on video. But I told him the same thing, and he looked for arrowheads for a long time, could not find an arrowhead anywhere around on his property. And he saw this juvenile. I don't know for how long it was, but the juvenile took off, and he said, you know, these things move so fast, you can't understand it. They run cartoon fast. And I go, really? He goes, oh, dude, you could never outrun one. They're so fast. They're cartoon fast. And I'm thinking back to the cartoons I used to watch when I was a kid and how fast things move. You know how the feet are moving and then they're just gone. And he said he went over to where the juvenile was standing, and he actually found a kind of like an arrowhead rock that he couldn't find anything on his property, and he actually found one, and it kind of looks like a Sasquatch. If you look at it, I showed him the stone I had that got woofed at me, and he showed me the arrowhead, and I'm like, wow, that looks like a Sasquatch head. It's got a cone shape to it, and, you know, conics. And he's like, yeah, I couldn't find one of these on my whole property. And he said, I seen this juvenile. It took off. And he said, I went over there to where it was, and it was on the ground. And I go, wow, that is crazy. He goes, you know, I'm thinking about taking it back in the woods, because I told him my story about what the Native American friend of mine told me. And I said, the people that know about what happened to me, they've all told me, you need to drive up to Michigan and you need to walk back in that woods and heave that stone and get out of there. Because 2015, I'm hunting in Indiana where I live. It was like in November. It was like during rut. And that's the deer's mating cycle. That's when you can really get some big bucks. And I sit out there all day in my stand. It started to get dark. The sun started to go down. You got a pink sky. So I'm like, well, it's, that's my cue to get out of here. So I got down, got all my gear, started out into a bean field. Beans were pretty high. I'm on my girlfriend's mom and dad's property. They got a house about, from where I was, maybe 175 yards away. Their field is probably, maybe 300 by 350. They got a big open field and they got 35 acres of woods. And I've harvested a lot of big deer out of there. So I come out, like I said, it was getting dark in the woods. When you can't see, you can't hunt. But, when you get outside of the woods, you still got, the sun isn't quite down, so you can kind of see. So I go out to that bean field, and I'm walking out in at about 50 yards. I turn right, and I start to walk towards the house. And as I'm walking, just thinking about, I saw some deer, but I didn't get any shots. Maybe, next weekend when I come over here, I might have a good chance. Well, to the right of me, way back in the woods, in the corner of the woods, I hear something walking towards me. And it's on 2 feet. It's not a deer or anything. It's not a coyote. It's nothing on 4 legs. It's on 2 legs. Well, there's nothing around there that isn't, on 4 legs except me. I'm on 2 legs because I'm a human being. So I'm walking down this bean field and this thing starts to get closer to me. Well, the sun's starting to go down. It's starting to get hard to see into the woods. And me and this thing, I hate to call it a thing, but me and whatever it was, is we're going to intersect. I'm coming up and I'm going to the west and it's coming from the north, but it's walking at an angle and it's getting louder and louder and louder as it's getting to me. And I start to hear the footfall in the leaves, and I click back to 2000 of what I heard, and I stop, and it takes the last step and stops. And I am like opening my eyes as wide as I can to try and see what the heck it is, because it stopped about 10 yards on the inside of the woods, and it's dark. I cannot see it, and I'm really trying to open my eyes and look and see if I can see anything. And it just stops and it's standing there and it's not moving, because if it starts to move, I'm going to be able to hear it because of, it's cold. All the leaves are on the ground from the trees. It's hard to walk, in leaves. They're so crunchy and noisy. So you can hear something coming from a long ways off. So this thing stops and it's just standing in there. And I'm standing in the bean field. And it lets out a scream. And I'm telling you, I immediately dropped down on one knee. I didn't think to do that. I just reflex. Boom, I'm down on one knee. And then beans are up around my face. I'm trying to get myself as small as I can, because this thing screamed at me. It's not a coyote. It's not a bobcat. It's not that kind of a scream. It's more of a woman being stabbed to death kind of scream. But this wasn't the loud one. It did that, and I was down in the beans looking over at it, and I'm like, man, I don't know what I should do. Like, I once again, I froze. Like, when this happens, I've heard all kinds of people, they freeze. You freeze, you can't make a move. You can't get your body to move. You can't get your muscles to move. You're just frozen there with fear, I guess. But it stopped screaming, and I'm still looking over like, what the heck is this? And then it let out the big scream, and it was so loud that I actually felt it on my right side of my chest. I felt the infrasound, whatever they call it, and it was hitting me against my chest. And it wasn't a lion roar. It was bigger. If you've ever heard a lion roar, this was decibely. This was 10 times louder than that. It was so loud that I felt it. And I was like a cartoon. Like, my feet took off before my body. And I'm running for my life for that house. And I got 100 yards left to go. And I'm running for everything. And I think I was, let's see, this was 2015. So I was maybe 50. But I was moving for all my life. And this thing is screaming while I'm running. And I was on Wes Germer's show, and he said, have you ever heard the Ohio sounds? And I said, well, I'm from Ohio, but no, I don't think I have. Well, he played it for me, and he said, is it something like that? I said, it's something like that. It's kind of like an air raid siren. It starts out real low, like, and it goes real loud. And it just holds that note, for a long time, and it's holding that note, and I'm running. And I got to the backyard that butts up against the field, and I threw my bow down, and I'm bent over trying to catch my breath. And here's the weird thing. I said to myself, if this is what I think it is, I am not moving. I am going to watch it step out in this field. I want to see it. Like, I want to see it. I've already experienced this. I want to see this. And it never came out in the field. I never heard it walk in the woods. Nothing. It started to get so dark that I couldn't hardly see into the field. So I got my bow. I usually spent the night. This was on a Saturday. I usually spent the weekend because I could just stay there. And the woods was literally real close to their house. Her parents weren't home, of course, that night. But I got up to my car. I got all my hunting gear off. I think I left my hunting pants on. And I got in my car. I did a Yui, and I went home. And I still hunt there to this day. I found some tree breaks in that woods. Here's the other thing. Way before this happened, I started hunting in the late 80s. And I would go in Ohio in a woods, and I'd be walking to my stand, or I'd be scouting in the woods, and I'd see a tree break, not knowing what the hell a tree break was, because Bigfoot wasn't on my mind. And I would see a tree break, 6.5, 7.5 feet up, the tree would be broke over. And then I would walk down another 75 yards, I'd see another tree break. Go down about another 50, 60 yards, another tree break. And they were like right in a row. And I'm like, wow, what? How would the wind do that? Like, all these trees around this sapling tree, and how would the wind break it just at 7 feet or 6.5 feet up and break it there, but not break it down where I am and break the tree over? How are the other trees around it not damaged? Then none of those are broke. It's just one single tree. I found tree breaks in Michigan on the property I hunted when I shot a deer between 2000 and 2003. I shot a deer, and I was blood trailing it, and I came to a tree break. 7 feet up, trees broke over. I'm like, wow, that tree's broke over. There's no other trees damaged around it. Why is it just this one tree broke over? I go another 50, 60 yards, there's another one. I go another 70 yards, there's another one, all the way off to the property, and then there's dirt road, and then it goes on. And I'm like, what in the heck is making these tree breaks? So when I started hunting, I started seeing all this. I saw evidence, but didn't know it was evidence. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know what was going on because I wasn't studying Bigfoot at the time. I was out there deer hunting. You know what I mean? So I didn't know what it was. Now I do. Now if I see one, I mind my surroundings, because if I find one, I know, hey, there might be something around here. You know what I mean? But it just shocked me as odd that I would see a tree break that high up, but it's not broke down where I am, and then there's no other trees that are damaged.
I was going to ask you about that whenever you were talking about your friend that has also been hunting, but, you know, is kind of on the fence about the whole thing.
Right.
A lot of people ask, well, if these things are real, why don't hunters see them all the time? And I tell them, well, they do, but
you just don't realize it.
Right. And hunters tend to pay attention to things that will help them, get the game that they're seeking at the time.
Right.
And kind of tunnel vision out on that specifically.
Right.
Before your encounter, if you had heard wood knocks or whoops or whatever, what do you think you would have thought they were?
I wouldn't, to be honest with you, not having Bigfoot in my head, I would have just went, wow, that's weird. That's odd. You know, what the heck was that? I would tell my friend, hey, I heard a whoop in here. What would make a whoop? Not knowing, about Bigfoot, and he would, my friend would just laugh it off or just say, you're hearing things. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I told my friend, just because you haven't encountered one doesn't mean they don't exist. All these people that are finding footprints, I told my friend, if one set of footprints are real, it exists. It doesn't have to be 10,000. It's only got to be one set of tracks. If they're real, they exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, Kerry Arnold, he's got Bigfoot Odyssey.
Yeah.
He saw one. He actually saw one. And it changed his life. He went home and sold all this stuff, and he never went back to a woods for 9 or 10 years. It shook him up so bad that he sold everything. It wouldn't go back to a woods. It took him everything to go back with a group of people. I heard him talking. It took everything to get back in there with a group of people around him. That's how much it shook his life up. Now, do you think that he's making it up? Do you think that he's lying to people? Why would he do that? Why?
Right.
Again, he's not going to get any money for it. His story, he's not going to be in a parade going downtown, in a city. He's not going to get anything but ridicule. So why would he make that up? I mean, it's ridiculous. I know people hoax. There are people out there that hoax and do footprints and all that. They usually get caught. But for the most point of people, it's like David Paulides. I've seen all of his documentaries. Do you know 75% of the people that go missing in national forests and parks are hunters? 75% of all the people are hunters, and they disappear without a trace. There's no bow found. There's no guns. There's no anything, no clothing, no nothing. They're just gone. The other ones are hikers. That's why, I want to get on some of these podcasts because I know people listen to them, and just let people understand to mind your surroundings. If you go hiking in a national forest that's 10,000 acres, there's all kinds of things out there that can get you, depending where you live in the country. But, don't walk down the trail and look at your feet. Look up and scan where you're going. You know what I mean? Don't go in there naive, because that's how people end up disappearing. They're just gone. And I don't want to be one of the statistics. So now now I go back in the woods in the dark, and I go out there, and it's hard at times because this is all in my mind, and it's playing, in my head as I'm walking with a flashlight out. It's a little eerie on quiet, mornings or walking out. I had a couple deer come in on me just this past year, and one was a buck, and I didn't want to shoot it because it was too small. You can't get down because you'll spook the game, and then they're gone, and they're not going to come in around your area again. So I had to sit out there till 9:30 at night in the dark, and I had to walk home in the dark through the woods with, coyote running, but I heard, I know what these animals sound like, so it's not so scary. I'm going to tell you right now, the characteristics of a deer, because I've hunted them for 31 years, when you spook a deer out of a bed, they sound like a freight train running, and they sound like a horse galloping. I've had a deer run right past me in a cornfield, and it sounds just like a horse. They run with 4 legs, and they gallop when they run. And they may stop to check you out in the dark, but once they know you're a predator, they're blowing. They blow snort all the way down through the woods to let all the other deer know there's a predator walking in the woods. That's the characteristics of them. Okay. The deer was the biggest thing I had in the woods in Michigan. There was nothing else in there. I mean, a coyote's maybe 50 pounds, 60 pounds. You got raccoons, squirrels, maybe a bobcat every once in a while. Nothing really big in there. I mean, I'm the biggest predator in there. So a deer doesn't get up, make a bunch of noise like it weighs a lot, make all this noise getting up, and then walk out behind you and then stop and stand there. That's not the characteristics of a deer. A deer will take off, it'll blow snort, and it's out of there. They don't stand there and look at you behind you in the dark, and then walk when you walk and then run. No, this was walking like a human being, like you and me. It had that kind of gait. And the other thing that was really creepy to me, in my first experience in 2000 is, it was very cunning. Like, it was really smart. I know people say these things are smart. But it was really smart, cunning. Like, it was trying to get out away from me and try and be as quiet as it could. That's why it wouldn't move until I moved, because otherwise I could pinpoint it. It may be dark, but I can at least know where you are. This was like trying to get away from me, but trying to get away from me so I didn't know where it was. And you got to have a brain to think like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Deer's not going to act like that. A coyote's not going to act like that. Any wild animal like that outside of a bear is, not going to charge you. They're all going to run away. And like I said, I know what everything on 4 legs sound like. And I know what a human being walking in the woods sounds like too. Because I've had people walk up right past where I was sitting when I was hunting down in Wayne National Forest, because I've hunted down in Ohio. Now I find out all kinds of people are seeing them down there. And I've been hunting down there. And that's 10,000 acres, man. That runs for a long way. I think that runs almost all the way to the start of the Appalachian Trail over by there. And it's a huge, big, tall, you could say, I guess, they're big, tall hills or mountains. They're pretty big. It's pretty hilly down there when you get close to Virginia. And I've been in there and heard all kinds of crazy stuff, dude. And I've had to walk out of there in the dark and in the dark. And that's a creepy, scary place to be down there.
Do you think I was going to ask you, do you think, with like your first encounter, obviously you stepped on the stick and spooked, whatever you want to call it. The second one where you were talking about walking out at your girlfriend's parents' place,
right?
And it screamed at you,
right?
And then going back to the rock throwing incident where you had rocks thrown at you,
right?
Do you think you got those sort of interactions because of what you were doing at the time?
Well, here's the thing, and I've talked to a couple of my friends that are hunters, and they kind of said to me, they were watching you for a long time. They watched you for 3 years and never showed themselves to you. And they think that the reason why they threw the rocks at me is, one, to see what I would do. Because let's look at this. Supposedly, these things have been around since Native Americans, over 1,000 years. Okay. So they've been around here for a long, long time. Native Americans have over 100 names for them. Do you think they'd have 100 names for something that doesn't exist? I mean, why would you make 100 names up for something that doesn't exist?
Right.
Teddy Roosevelt wrote about a Bigfoot. Davy Crockett or Daniel Boone, one of them, supposedly shot one and killed it. This is all history. Okay. So, my friends are like, they've been watching you for a long time, and, they know you're a hunter. They hunt. They know you're a hunter. They also know that you could probably kill one of them, because I'm sure these things have seen what man can do. Look, we took all the land away from the Native Americans. We swept in and this was all theirs. So I think these things know that we're predators and know that, we can be very aggressive and we could kill one. So I think that's why you don't see one unless they want you to see it. And they're really standoffish. They're, the biggest hide and seek species ever, as they say. And, my friend said they probably were getting close to you. They threw rocks at you, wanted to see what would happen. And they were probably getting ready to show themselves at you or to you. They were probably getting ready to make a connection. And I was like, oh, Lord, I'm glad I got out of there. Because, I would not have a problem. I told some of my friends, if I was in Oregon or the Pacific Northwest, I'm going down Highway 101 or whatever, or Highway 1 along the California coast, and I'm doing 70 mile an hour, and one walks out of the woods or up out of a ravine and is standing alongside the road, I would love it, doing 70 mile an hour. Oh, hey, cool, I see you, goodbye. And I'm down the road, you know what I mean? I don't have to have real interaction. I don't have to have one as close as I did in Michigan, because it was very close to me. That would be cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to actually see one or have one walk up close to me and have it stare at me or rock back and forth, I don't know, man. Like Kerry Arnold, his world got turned upside down. My world got turned upside down. I want people to understand, if you ever have an interaction with this, or you see one, or there's one paralleling you, trying to get you out of their area, it's going to turn your world upside down. You're not going to believe what you're hearing. Your mind is going to try and straighten it all out. And it's going to turn you upside down. It's going to change part of your life. The only difference between me and Carrie is I just made up in my mind, they weren't going to push me out. If I see one, I see one, but they're not going to push me out of doing what I love to do. I wasn't going to give up. I almost did, but I wasn't going to do it. But, I feel bad for Carrie because, he loved to hunt. I spoke to him on the phone. I was supposed to be on his show a long time ago, but they had a hurricane and we just lost each other, and I never ended up being on a show. But I heard him. I heard Wes's story with his brother Woody, and seeing three of them and one bluff charging them in their car. And it just gave me the willies, man, because it was in the dark and they heard it growl and everything else. See, I didn't hear any growling. I didn't hear any samurai talk or chatter with this. This thing was just trying to get out and around me and get out. And, it was just creepy. I mean, it was so creepy, man. I can't convey it across to you without you being standing right next to me, of how creepy and terrifying it was in the dark to hear this thing and how big it was. It had to have been 600 to 1,000 pounds. The way it ran and sounded, I mean, I'm talking 7 to 8 feet tall. It had to have been. I mean, the stride was, I know people that are 6'8", they can't do more than a 4 foot stride. They've tried it. They can't do it. 6'5", 6'8", they can't do it. This thing was taking 6 foot strides or better running. So, those are the two things that happened to me. I have done a lot of research on this subject. Like I said, I'm not a field researcher, but I've done a lot of research online. I've listened to a lot of encounters from people on a lot of different podcasts. I read this article about this family in Tennessee. They had a family of Sasquatch, that they had a fruit room, like it was in a barn or whatever. And these things would come in and break the pickle jars and the jars of fruit and eat it. They would see them stack rocks and all that. Well, I read about this and I had it on my phone. And, you know, my girlfriend knows about all this now. I kind of broke down and told her. I haven't told a lot of people, but I'm with her. I've been with her for 8 years. So I told her. And I told her that, you know, Sasquatch stacks rocks. And I said, and she's like, oh, come on, Scott. I'm like, here's the article. So I let her read it. And she's like, oh, my God. And there was a picture of some rock stackings. And I've heard this from people that have gifted them. And you know, they'll leave some crazy rocks or they'll leave rocks stacked. And so I went out to Vegas last year. And every time we go out to Vegas, we try and do something new or different. I'm not a gambler. My girlfriend is. So we try and do something different. So she said, hey, let's go to Red Rocks. It's like northwest of Vegas. Let's go out there. There's a lot of canyons. There's wild horses, supposedly, and donkeys running around. And there's some places you can walk around. It's just big canyons. Well, supposedly this one place had pyroglyphs. And I'm like, oh, cool. I've never seen pyroglyphs. This will be great. So we go out there, and you pay like $20, and there's a 13-mile track that goes around, 13 miles long, and they have all these stations that you can stop at, and you can get out, and you can go down in the canyons and walk around, or you can rappel, climb the face. There was one guy climbing the face of where we were going to go, so you can go there, shows you where you are along the route. You can get something to drink, go to the bathroom. So there were these 25-mile-an-hour gusts. I had a cowboy hat on, and I had to put the rope down around my neck so my cowboy hat wouldn't fly off, so I wouldn't lose it. But it was really windy, and it was like 55 degrees out there, which was not the norm because I've been out there. Usually it's 90 to 105 degrees because you're in the desert. So it's like 55 degrees. So we go to this one station, and my girlfriend's like, hey, we can go hike back in here. This will be fun. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, maybe we'll see some wildlife, or, you know, maybe we'll see a rattlesnake or something. You know, it'll be cool to see something. Because the only snakes or spiders I've ever seen are in a zoo. You know what I mean? I want to see something in the wild. So these people were coming out as we're starting to go down this hike. And we're like, well, how far is this hike? Oh, it's not very far. You know, it's back in there a little ways, but it's not very far. So we start down this trail, and we're walking, and, you know, before long, we get to the face of this mountain or this cliff area, and this guy is climbing it. And I didn't see him at first. I heard somebody talking, and I'm like to my girlfriend, do you hear that talking? Do you hear that? What the heck there's nobody around us. Well, his wife was at the bottom feeding him rope, and he was climbing it. But we couldn't see her, and we didn't look up to see him. So we're hearing these two people talk, and I'm like, this is creeping me out. Like, you know, how come people are talking back here? There's nobody else here. Well, I happened to look up, and I saw the guy climbing, and he was like 6 stories up. And he was 61 feet. He was climbing way up there. And I'm like, oh, I hit my girlfriend, and I said, look up. And then we seen her, and I said, oh, okay. I was like, woo, you know what I mean? Now we got the people with the voices, right? We go over, and we're looking at this pyroglyph, and I'm taking pictures of it, and it's cool. It's really, really cool. I couldn't really make out what the figures were, but I'd never seen one in real life. So they had a little thing there, and it told you about what the pyroglyph was. They didn't know if it was made by the Native Americans or who it was. So I was reading on it. So, you know, we're just standing there looking around, and I'm like, I am going to go out this way. I'm going to go towards the north, and I'm just going to go check things out. I'm here, you know, maybe I'll see a snake, maybe I'll see a tarantula. I'll get some good pictures of it. So I start out in this valley, and she's looking at the guy climbing everything. I said, I'm just going to go about 100 yards out. I said, you know, through the cactus and mesquite and everything. I just want to check things out, and then I'll come back and we'll get out of here. So I get going out in this valley, right, between these cliffs. And all of a sudden the wind dies down and it stops. There's no wind. There's no gusts. There's nothing. It just gets quiet. I mean, nothing. No sound, no nothing. And I'm kind of zigzagging through the mesquite and everything. And I'm looking, down at my feet and everything, see if I see something crawling or, see a scorpion or something. And I get through this mesquite and I get to this clearing. And I stop and I look, and there's 4 or 5. You're not going to believe it. There's 4 or 5 rock stackings, about 3 to 4 foot high. And some of these rocks in the middle, I could not do this. I want to see somebody do it. You'd have some big rocks, and then you'd have a really tiny rock, and then more big rocks. And the big rocks were sitting on the tiny rock. And then there was a smaller rock sitting next on the flat part of the big rock. And there was 4 or 5 of them, different rocks, and they were all rock stackings. And immediately the hair went up on my neck, and I got the heebie-jeebies. Why is this out here? Who did this? Why are there rock stackings out here 100 yards from the main trail? This isn't just off the main trail or on the inside of the main trail where people walk. This is out 100 yards, a football field away. And this is a clearing. And who did this? Why would somebody come out here? I'm thinking all these things in my head. Why is there no wind out here? There's 25-mile-an-hour gusts. There's no wind. There's no nothing. Everything has died down. It's dead and it's quiet. And it's almost like, did you ever see the movie Jeremiah Johnson with Robert Redford?
Yeah, great movie.
Yes, awesome movie. Where he takes those people, they go through, I don't know if it's, I can't think of what tribe it was, Blackfoot or something, and he's really not supposed to go through there because that's where all of their people are buried.
Yeah.
He walks or gets through there with his horses, gets all those soldiers through there, and he's coming back, and he just stops, and he sees a Native American in their burial thing, and they burned it. It's just the skull, and it's looking at him, and he just automatically gets creeped out, like something isn't right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how it was. That's the feeling I got. I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, this is all carved out. Like, there's no mesquite in this. It's an open area. I took pictures. I can send them to you. But there were all kinds of different rock stackings. And I hear all these people talk about these rocks stacked a certain way that they gift to, if they have one, in their area, they'll leave food or whatever. And, it'll take all the peanut butter out of the jar and leave the jar on the ground with the lid screwed off, and they'll leave them a gift or a rock or a couple rocks stacked. These are pretty big size rocks, to small rocks to big rocks stacked in all these different ways. Well, I'm like, you know what? I'm out. I started backpedaling. Like, I'm looking at it, walking backwards, trying to get myself through the mesquite. My girlfriend came up to me. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, we're getting out of here. She's like, well, what do you mean? I said, look at all these rock stackings. They're all over the place here. Who would do this? I mean, I would not walk out 100 yards from the main trail or the trail I'm on. How'd the rocks get there?
Hikers and other people have been making rock stackings forever to mark trails.
Right.
And now it's become a thing where there's people that see it as a form of artwork, and they'll balance stones. And I've seen some rock stackings that it looks like they're defying gravity. I have no idea how they do it. That's
what some of these were.
But why would somebody do it out in the middle of nowhere where nobody's going to see it?
Exactly. If I'm going to hoax, okay, common sense wise, I'm going to put something right along the trail where somebody can see it, or just off the trail. I'm not going to carry rocks 100 yards out to do rock stackings. Why? Why are you going to do that? What's the purpose of that? If you're leaving it for a trail marking and there's no trail there, okay, you can erase that off. If you want somebody to see how awesome you can stack rocks, whatever that's for, if there's people that are into it, okay, you're going to do it right by where people are walking and they can see it. oh, that's cool. Look at that. You're not going to do it out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of mesquite and everything, in a valley somewhere. I don't know why anybody, if humans did that, I applaud them. Seriously, I'm going to give them a golf clap, because just to carry some of them rocks out there, they're pretty heavy. So if you're going to go through all that to go out somewhere where nobody's going to see them, it doesn't make any sense to me. There's no common sense in that.
Right.
And I got a boatload of common sense. I mean, I was raised in the 70s and 80s. My parents raised me with, if it doesn't feel right, it isn't right.
Right.
You know, you step in dog poop, it smells and looks like dog poop, it's dog poop. It's not going to be something else. So that just did not make any sense to me. So, we got back to the trail. And then as soon as we got back to the trail, all the wind comes up, and now it's really windy again. And I'm like, well, let's just get in our car and we'll do the rest of the thing and we'll get out of here. So that's what we did. And I went back to Vegas, and it was on my mind, man. It was like, and then I'm thinking, did I see this because I picked that damn stone up? Is this another way that they're connecting with me, or what? What is it? You know what I mean? Why would I see this? Why would I walk into this? I've never been here before. I've never been to Red Rock Canyon, ever. I've been to Vegas. That was my third time. I never even heard of Red Rock Canyon. Only the reason why I went there is because my girlfriend went there a year before me with her sisters. I didn't go, and they went out there to Red Rock Canyon and drove around. Why I went there, we didn't have to go there. Why my girlfriend said, let's go to Red Rock Canyon. It's uncanny. I don't know. Was I meant to do that? Is this another way that they're showing me? I don't know. I really don't know. It was just really weird that those were there. And they were all over the place. They weren't in a row or anything. There was one over here, one to my left, one straight ahead, one kind of halfway to my left. It was real weird. It's just defying how, if somebody's stacking rocks and can do it that good, they should have an Olympic field for it, because it was unbelievable, man. I couldn't believe it.
Well, I can't explain it. And I know a lot of listeners have experienced this. A lot of people have experienced it. Whenever you just get somewhere and you just know that it's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when I got out of my car in 2000 and it was so quiet, I actually heard ringing in my ears. And I know there's going to be some hunters that are going to listen to this and they're going to go, oh, I've heard that before. It was just really, I got goosebumps right now, just going back to it in my head. But it was the first thing I thought, this is really weird. Like usually you're hearing crickets, or you're hearing tree frogs, or you're hearing some kind of chirping. There was nothing, brother. Nothing. I mean, there was nothing. It was dead still. It was weird. Very, very weird and strange and creepy. I mean, creepy. And that's why when I heard this thing get up, when I stepped on that branch or that twig and it cracked and I heard this thing get up, I wish I could have taped the sound, because if you heard it, you would go, holy woly, holy crap. Because it made so much noise getting up. It had to be huge. It made a lot of noise. That's the first characteristic of it that really stood out in my mind, was what in the hell is this? Because it's big. And then I hear it walk, breaking branches on the ground, walking in a semicircle in behind me on the 2-track. And then it just stopped, and it just stood there and would not move. It was like almost like chess. Okay, I made my move. Now I'm here. Now you make your move, and we'll see. And it would not move. It was standing there in the dark. That's cunning, man. That's something with a large brain that's gonna go, I'm not gonna move till you move. And then when you move, hopefully you're going to make enough sound. You're not going to hear me moving, but I could hear it, man. Its feet were so big, dude. I could hear it. It was crunching everything on the ground. I could hear it. And it was making more sound than me.
How far away do you think it was on the trail?
It was probably Probably 90 feet. It was probably 30 yards away from me. And that's not very far away.
No, not at all.
Nope. Because I'm a deer hunter and I'm on yardage. I got to know how many yards that deer is to take it. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you're going to wound a deer or you're going to shoot over it, under it. Right. I mean, you got to really know your yardage. And it was about 30 yards. And it only took 5 steps to get there, dude. And it was a pretty good distance from where it got up right next to me. It was probably 35 yards away from me and got up. Then it took 5 steps, and it was already in behind me. And it didn't run. It walked like you and me. That's the second characteristic. It walked like us. Okay? There's nothing in there that's going to walk like us unless it's another human being. And when you're a hunter, and you hear somebody else walking, I don't care who you are, especially during gun season, you're going to go, hey, I'm over here, because you don't want to get shot.
Right.
You don't want that hunter thinking you're a deer. So if that was another human, they would have said, hey, I'm walking in here behind you. I don't know, man. That's the 3 things that have happened to me, the tree breaks I've seen, the whoops I've heard, the tree knocks, the whistling. I hear a guy on Wes Germer's show, like, I don't know, probably 7 months ago. The guy's on there. He does the exact same whistle as me. I've never met the guy. I don't know him. He's out west somewhere. How does he have the same whistle as me? How? If this isn't real, if these things aren't whistling, I've heard of all kinds of people have heard these things whistle and then seen them. So, how's this guy do the same whistle as me? It's a characteristic. I don't know the guy, never met the guy, and he did the exact same whistle. I was on this other podcast. After I was done with the podcast, they said, hey, it'll be, up in a week if you want some of your friends to listen, which I don't, because I don't want the ridicule. I don't want people texting me LOL or you're a nut or whatever. There's a very small circle of people that know about this. But, I hear this guy do the same whistle, and it's like, I don't even know this guy. And he did the exact same whistle as me. So it just adds to one more thing. That's why people are like, well, do you believe in it? Well, it's not a question if I believe in it. It's a question of I know it. Like, there's not a question in it. I know that these things are real. I don't really want to run into one again, because it's very scary, man. There's, and I haven't even really seen one, but being screamed at, which, sounds like somebody being murdered. To hear that loud of a decibel coming out of something that is big, you can feel the sound on you. I mean, I've heard lions roar at a zoo. They're pretty loud. But this was like 10 times louder. I mean, it was like having, if you've ever been down at a park and had an air raid siren, like a tornado signal start, they're doing like a test, and you're down by it, and you hear how loud that is. That's how loud it was. I mean, I cupped my ears. When the first scream, I cupped my ears because it was so loud, and I could still hear it. So, it's just it's a crazy subject. I mean, people all the time, come on, man, this isn't real. Okay, well then how do you supposedly explain away Gigantopithecus? That was a 12-foot ape that lived right along man, walked on upright. They found its jawbone, so it existed. How can there maybe not be, Sasquatch or Bigfoot? Maybe it's their ancestor. I think these things were in Europe. I think they came across the Bering Strait and down into Alaska, into Canada, down through North America, into California, and spread out through the Midwest. That's why they're in Texas. People are in Missouri seeing them, Minnesota, Ohio. I'm hunting down in Wayne National Forest, and I'm hearing people on podcasts are seeing down there all over the place, seeing red eye shine in the dark. As far as New York, you got Melba Ketchum. She splits the DNA. It's half female and something that she can't explain for the DNA. It's nothing on the record table in this earth. So if you believe in the Bible and you believe the whole Nephilim thing, where angels fell, they mated with females, and this was the abomination that came out of it. If you believe the Bible, because it's in there. They found these graves of these giants, all over the place. So, and then you got Roger Patterson in the Gimlin film. You got Patty. Look, that's not a person in a suit. They went down and did the compression test on her footprint, and Bob Gimlin tried to jump off a fallen tree and put his boot right next to it and couldn't even touch the impression that she left. He took his 1,200-pound horse next to it and tried to do a compression as deep and couldn't do it. Okay? There's no zipper in the suit. The guy that said that he did it wasn't even 7 foot. They said she was pretty close to 7 foot, anywhere from 800 to maybe 12 or 1,300 pounds. The guys from Disney, the guy that did Planet of the Apes, said, both of them said, we don't have the technology to make a suit like that. So whoever did that is somebody unbelievable, because we don't have the technology. And here's my thing, okay? If you faked it, if you did the Patty thing and that was you in the suit, where's the suit? If you did it and you want to prove that it's a hoax, show me the suit. I want to see the suit.
I've had that conversation thousands of times, especially in today's world. You can't tell me that somebody would just sit on it this long.
Yeah.
I mean, you would be proud of it. You would be famous. That suit would be worth a lot of money to somebody.
Here's the other thing it would prove, Matthew. We're all liars. Everybody that's supposedly seen one, found footprints, my experiences, we're all liars. Or it was something else. It's not Bigfoot. If you can bring me that suit and show me that suit, all this is a hoax.
Well,
then it's not true.
Those of us who have experienced it know better.
Exactly.
Just because of the type of person I am. From day one, after my first encounter with these things, I was like, I don't care if you believe me. I don't expect you to believe me. It's one of those things where you have to experience it to understand.
Yeah. And, I was on a podcast, on my friend's podcast out in Missouri that saw two of them. And I believe him. I mean, he told me exactly what they look like. So he either has to have a great imagination or he really saw it. It's that simple. There's no way else to cut it. So, he even agrees with me. I mean, look, if that was a human in that suit, if you watch her walking, she's looking around. She's not looking down. I cosplay, okay? I cosplay as Batman. Okay, we were talking about it. I can't look down when I have that whole suit on and that cowl. I can only look straight ahead. I can't see where I'm walking. You'd have to have somebody at least 7 foot tall. They'd have to be well over 800 pounds. You'd have to put a suit on and then walk pigeon-toed, because this thing walked pigeon-toed with 1 foot in front of the other. If you see real Sasquatch footprints, it's 1 footprint in front of the other. They go out. That's why when they walk, they glide. They don't walk like we do. If you lay on your back and take your knees up over your head and look at somebody walking by you, we bounce when we walk. We bounce. We don't glide. These things glide because their leg never straightens out like ours does. When we kick our foot out when we're walking, our leg goes all the way straight. They don't. They have a hinge, and then they have the tarsal break on their foot, so they never bend their leg all the way out. So they're gliding, okay? So first of all, I saw the video of the guy that said that he was her, and he kind of walks a little bit like her, but he's not walking like her. And he wouldn't be able to see where he's going. He'd trip over something. She just fluidly walks through the video and walks on down there. You can see her foot come all the way back up. Our feet don't come all the way back up when we walk. You know what I mean?
Right.
Our feet don't come that far off the ground. There's still pictures of her foot all the way up. Okay? So, there's so many things that's for that's not a person in a suit. I don't care. I've showed my friend, oh, well, I'm still on the fence. I'm like, dude, you can see the hematoma leg bulge on the thigh. When I put my suit on for cosplay, you can't see the muscle movement underneath it. I have muscles in my suit, okay, to enhance my body, but those muscles don't move. And the muscle underneath it doesn't move. The reason why you can see the muscle moving on her leg is because that's her muscle. That's her muscle under her hair. That's not a suit. And people that don't cosplay don't understand that whole spectrum. Like, you're seeing her muscle vibrate and move as she takes a step because that's really her muscle, because that's not a person in a suit. But there's people out there that still won't believe. You could bring a body of a one in and they say, oh, that's a person in a suit. It could be dead. Well, that's a dead person in a suit. They're just not going to believe it. And you could talk to your face is blue for a long time, and they're just not going to believe you. And that's why, for me, coming on a podcast, it's not about me trying to get people to believe. I'm just telling you what happened to me. And these things are real, man. It's not fake. It's not folklore. It's not even a legend. These things have been inhabiting this earth for, I think, longer than we've been here. They've been here a really long time. Were they put here to protect the earth? I don't know. I've heard where some of them will protect you in the forest. I've heard some of them that will push you out. I think a lot of them are like humans. There's some humans that are very evil, and there's some humans that are really good. And you want to encounter a human that's really good. You don't want to encounter a human that's very evil, because they'll take you out. And I think a lot of these are like that. There's some of them that have good disposition, and there's some of them that have bad disposition, and you don't want to come across one that weighs 800 pounds with a bad disposition, because it's not going to be good for you. Are they taking people? I don't know. I've never seen one take a person, but I'll tell you one thing. These people are disappearing. These children, I've listened to David Politis, some of these kids, and their parents turn away, they turn back, and their kid's gone. They get this big, huge search party. They never find the child. They don't find clothing. They don't find blood. And then weeks later, they find a pair of tennis shoes or a tennis shoe 6.5 miles away on top of a mountain. You're going to tell me that 7-year-old kid went 7 miles up on top of a mountain? I couldn't climb a mountain. I couldn't get up there on a steep incline with trees, and I don't think I could do it. And I'm a grown man. And, I've stayed in shape for a pretty good long time. And I don't think I could do it. So how is that kid's shoes getting up there? How are they getting up there? You're going to tell me a mountain lion's going to take his shoes up there on top of a mountain in its mouth after it kills the kid and eats it? It's going to pick his shoes up and carry it up there. See, once again, it's not common sense. So how's his shoes getting up there? How's that happening? How are they finding somebody's pants up there? I don't know. I don't know if they cloud somebody's mind with infrasound, because I've heard of people getting nauseated after they've seen one and it's yelled or screamed to the point where they can't hardly walk, like they're dizzy. I didn't have that. I felt this scream. I took off running. I didn't even have time to get dizzy. I took off running because I was in fear of my life, because this thing was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life, scream. So you're going to tell me it's a mountain lion? I don't think we have mountain lions in Indiana. We might have bobcats. But, then I've listened to some people on Wes's show from Indiana. Truck driver sees a Sasquatch peer around his truck when he's on the outside of it, checking things out, because his freezer box, that coolant that keeps his trailer froze, was on the cahoots, and he was out checking it, and this Bigfoot, he sees a handprint come around his truck, and the thing peers around at him. That was on 65, okay? Highway 65. I don't live that far from it. He saw one. That's in Indiana. I heard another lady's encounter on a show. I didn't know she was from Indiana. She's seen 4 of them on her parents' property in Indiana. So, my friend, they're everywhere. They're in every state. Are they living in square timber? I don't think so. I think the one I encountered was pushing through. I think they migrate a long way, hunting. I think in the winter they might migrate somewhere and then come back in the spring or summer, and then they might be around there. But you know, I've heard a lot of people's encounters from all over the country, and they've seen them and heard them, and you know. And I've had them right here in Indiana. I had one. So, and you're not going to tell me it wasn't it, because it was just too big sounding. There's no other animal on the face of this earth can make that sound. Bears growl. There's things that growl, but this wasn't a growl. This was a scream. There's a big difference, a big difference. So that's what I've had go on in my life. I'm half tempted to get rid of this rock or this stone, because I do not want to I don't want to have another occurrence with one. I really don't. And I'm still hunting, and I'm still going out in the dark, which is scary enough. It's great to see the sun start to come up, but I've heard all kinds of stories from hunters who have seen them and walked right by them and looked up at them. I heard one guy was up in his stand. He happened to look over across the field about 300 yards away, seen something walking out around a woods, came out. He put a scope up. And this is the creepy thing for me. Put a scope up on the animal, zoomed in, saw what it was, and it was looking right at him as he pulled the scope up. That's creepy stuff, because how does that thing know you're there when it's that far away? And it was enough for the guy to pack all the stuff up, and he just got down and went home. He got out of there, and he didn't go back. So that's creepy stuff. I've heard how fast they run. I heard about how fast they run on all fours. I've heard people say, you're not going to outrun one. So there's no point in trying to outrun one. But that's my experiences, and in a nutshell. And, I've not told a lot of people, but, you just got to remember, if you're a hunter or you're out hiking, you're going to hear a lot of weird stuff. Just know that it's not, always a bear or something like that. It can be something else that weighs about 900 to 1,000 pounds and walks upright on 2 legs. So just watch what you're doing. And that's basically, my whole thing.
Scott, thanks for coming on and sharing your encounters. Absolutely amazing stuff.
Well, it's been my pleasure, because, I just want people to understand that, it can happen to you, and these things are real, and they're all over the place. And just because you're out on a hike or you're camping and you hear something way, way out there yell or scream at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's not always going to be something other than Sasquatch. Most of the time, if you hear something that sounds that loud, that's usually pretty much what it is, because I've heard all kinds of sounds of these things, all the samurai chatter, which is very creepy. I've listened to the Sierra sounds out in Oregon that the guys captured, how the guys were making noise and the Sasquatch were making noise back to them. So just everybody watch what you're doing when you're out there. Look at your surroundings, mind your surroundings, and know what's going on. And if something isn't right, back out and get out. That's my saying. Back out and get out.
There's no shame in retreating.
Because you get to live another day.
That's right.
You go forward, you don't know what's going to happen. I would never, ever, if I had another encounter, I would never press it. It's back out and get out. I'm not going to push these things because, like I said, you can get a good one or a nice one, or you can get a really bad one. And you don't want a bad one that can run like a cartoon, because you're not going to outrun that. And that's a scary thing. And even if you have a big gun, it may not work. So I've heard of hunters that had some guns, but they even said, I didn't have enough firepower to drop something like this because it was so big. So that's my thing, man. Thanks a lot for letting me come on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Even though it's been a year. So
hey, to me, it was worth the wait, man.
It is what it is, Matthew, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if you've had your own Bigfoot encounter or encountered something unexplained in the woods, give me a shout at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check me out on Instagram at Bigfoot Crossroads, Twitter at BF Crossroads, and on Facebook, Bigfoot Crossroads. And as always, thanks for listening to Bigfoot Crossroads.